Hello and welcome to Living Their Faith, Valley Catholics Reaching Out Directly to the Homeless. We have a very special program today with three very special guests who will share their faith and what implications that faith has for their life as Catholics serving the homeless. Our first guest is Lisa Apper, who is the director of the St. Benedict Catholic Worker House here in Fresno. Next to her would be Cruz Avila, the executive director of the Poverello House, serving thousands here in our city. And on my right is my good friend, Father Steve Bofur, pastor of St. Joseph's Parish in Mariposa, which has a very beautiful and unique ministry serving the homeless up in Mariposa County. I wonder if we could see that quote from Bill Simon to begin our conversation today. The city of Fresno has the third highest rate of homelessness in the nation, and it is thought to have 6,000 homeless living on the street. What would be your initial reactions and what that means to you as Catholics and what we are doing about it personally? Who would like to start?
Well, I will say that I think the figure in terms of the entire group of homeless is very small. 6,000 living on the street and probably another 20,000 that are what we call the hidden homeless. They are couch hoppers, they live with relatives, they move on, or they live in a car. In our county, many people live in tents or trailers, abandoned trailers on private property with people's permission, or in campsites. So I think the situation is much worse than we first would acknowledge.
I think I have to agree with Father as well, is that I really had the pleasure and the honor to actually do the point-in-time count this year as well, for the first time actually experiencing it, and until you actually experience it and live it and actually get up at those early morning hours to actually go do the count and do the survey of the homeless population in our city. Looking at those numbers, it's kind of interesting because I did have the conversation with Bill Simon myself, and with those numbers, I don't really like to put those numbers out there. And when I say put those numbers out there, because they are, like Father said, those hidden numbers where it could be more than those 6,000. So when we look at those 6,000 numbers, it's really looking off of the surveys that are being taken place. But when you go and really look at the different area codes that you're surveying, some of those are still going to be missed. So there's a lot more homeless population out there, and that's where we come together as a community to really help out that population in need.
Lisa, as a Catholic and a Catholic worker, you've been at this so deeply, so personally. Share something about that.
Well, I wanted to add to what Father Steve and Cruz said about homelessness in Fresno, first of all. And the Brookings Institute had done a study several years ago, and Fresno is not only the third highest in homelessness, but we also have the deepest pockets of poverty in the United States. Worse than Appalachia. So not only is there the homeless issue, but there's the food deprivation issue, the needs of clothing and adequate life essentials that people are desperately lacking in Fresno. As far as my faith stance is concerned, as a girl of 18, I had heard about the Catholic Worker. And for me, it was all about serving those in need. I had read in school after 12 years of Catholic education, Matthew 25, feed the hungry, shelter the homeless, visit the imprisoned. And when I heard about the Catholic Worker at 18, I was just set on fire. It was a Pentecostal moment for me, a moment where my church was taking the lead in helping those in need.
I think the recognition of the immensity of the numbers of homeless really touches us and demands a spiritual response. I know when I recognize that there's so many more than are visible on a day-to-day basis, my heart breaks, and I think of the compassion of Jesus and trying to reach out in any way that can really be a benefit to the homeless and something that they can really appreciate and recognize as coming from the compassion and the charity and the goodness of a faith-living Christian community, to me, is a great, big aspect.
I was also very encouraged by our Pope, who said he wanted a church of the streets. He didn't want a church that just was good in the corner. He really wanted Catholics to be out there, to be there where there is need and where we see our brothers and sisters in need and wanting.
Cruz, I want to ask you about, besides being now the executive director of the Poverello, personally, you've done other things prior to that, obviously. How has some of this commitment as a Catholic translated itself, as Bishop challenged us in his letter, to move it from words to action?
I think action always speaks louder than words. A person can say a lot, could try to implement a lot, but it's not until you actually show that action, it's the action to the reaction. And one of the things for me as a Catholic is God has always set that plan. And has always, when you try to fight, sometimes where you want to go one direction, he guides you to another direction, and it's that direction that he has always set forth for you to conquer and to be a part of. And it wasn't till that moment that I became the executive director at the Poverello House that I knew that was my new journey, and that was the plan, to continue my faith, not only as a Catholic, but as a human being, as a loving human being to the clients that we serve on a day-to-day basis, because it's not till you actually live and the day and day of a client is that you can actually see and respond and live through the eyes of each of these clients that we help on a day-to-day basis. And the faith as a Catholic and the spiritual belief that every human deserves a second chance is one of the areas for me, is that when we're feeding and providing those resources for our clients that walk through our community on a day-to-day basis, that's the blessing in itself, and it doesn't get better than that.
Our second quote that we'd like to share comes from the bishop. It comes from the letter that he wrote in our current issue of Central California Catholic Life. Some are tempted in our society, says Bishop, to see the homeless as less than human. He goes on with many details of what this would be and how it gets translated into our not understanding the depth of the issues that would result in homelessness. I wonder if someone would like to look at what Bishop said and respond to it personally. What is your reaction to his insight that we are dehumanizing many times the homeless?
I think it's as simple as your own observation when you're walking down the street and you see somebody who obviously is homeless, that you tend to avoid eye contact with them. You tend to talk to somebody else. You rarely say hello to them, you know, and that's a way of dehumanizing them so that you don't have to deal with them. And that's why we choose to deal with them. And one of the main aspects of what we do for the homeless, serving meals and providing shelter in our parish church 2 nights a week, and then in the Methodist church or hall 5 nights a week, plus 11 other churches that provide meals and food as teams. We try to create a family, a sense of family, and it's working. We all know each other by name. They appreciate one another, and we talk to one another as normal human beings, and that's giving them the dignity that they deserve, whether they're homeless or not.
I agree with you, Father Steve. It's very important that the gospel tells us it's not charity. These are our brothers and sisters. These are people that are our peers in terms of how we relate to them. And it's very important. Dorothy Day was very adamant about the personalist approach that I remember in that movie Schindler's List, The Ring that Oscar Schindler got, said a quote from the Talmud, which was, when you save one life, you save the world entire. And it really boils down to that personalist approach. We, as a Catholic worker, have had a soup line for 17 years in front of Fresno County Jail. And people are welcomed as our brothers and sisters. We have a house of hospitality where we've had and continue to have homeless people stay with us. We had Pam Kincaid, who was instrumental in bringing a lawsuit against the city for taking the things of the homeless. She lived off and on at our Catholic Worker House for years. We also had Elizabeth Garrison, who ended up living at our house of hospitality. She had end-stage lung cancer and stayed with us for a year and died at our house. And that's one of the spiritual works of mercy, is to bury the dead. So it is that personalist approach. We also did a year recently of hospice for a sheriff's lieutenant who was dying of end-stage COPD. So these are our brothers and sisters. We take it personally that we have that obligation, that justice to be for them when they are in need.
Cruz.
You know, I think for me it's, and I'll use a quote from Nelson Mandela, you know, we are all creators of our own destiny. I think when working with clients, sometimes they have maybe perhaps stepped in the wrong direction at one point in their time, but it's coming back and retracting and having us help them get to that next step. It's until you actually sit down and are able to speak with one of these clients face to face, person to person, that you understand the story that's behind that book. It's every person has a story. It's the willingness to know if you want to continue to read that story or read that book and understand each chapter of that person's life. Or, like Father Steve said, sometimes, you know, folks just don't want to even open up that chapter, open up that book. And that's the part. Reading is an amazing tool to get to that next chapter.
We have to take our break right now, unfortunately, but we will be back. We're going to meet something called Matthew 25. We're going to also hear about a man named Pope Francis and see what their insights are and their challenges for us. Stay tuned, because we'll be right back.
KNXT thanks all its loyal viewers and respected businesses who have supported your Catholic television station. Now you can support KNXT with program underwriting by having your name, your company's name, or organization associated with your favorite program. Detailed information about you or your company will appear before and after each program or day part you select. Keep the quality and spiritual message alive and make a difference. Call 559-488-7440 today or go online at knxt.tv to find out more about program underwriting on KNXT.
Welcome back to our very important conversation with three activists in their own way. We have Lisa Apper from the Catholic Worker House, we have Cruz Avila from Pavarello House, and Father Steve Bofur all the way from St. Joseph up in Mariposa, sharing their personal commitments, their Catholic faith-rooted baptismal calls to serve our brothers and sisters. The challenge I'm going to give them right now comes from the powerful chapter 25 of Matthew, which we all know by heart, but we don't always really believe it. For I was hungry and you gave me the food. I was thirsty and you gave me to drink. I was a stranger and you welcomed me, and on and on. And then it says, when did we see you? Well, it's when you see Jesus in his most distressing disguise that Christ is among us. Who would like to begin the challenging thought of how are we doing with Matthew 25, personally, as a church, as Catholics?
I think when you look at that discourse, it's called the Last Judgment. And what Scripture is telling us it's not an option. If our goal is to go to heaven and be with Jesus, we have to do this. We have to feed the hungry. We have to. It's justice. It's what our Lord demands of us. I really think that everyone can do something. Not everybody can do exactly what each person on this panel can do, but you do with what you have, and you share with what you can give. And in 2000, I went back to school to get a master's degree in pastoral counseling. And as part of our Catholic Worker, I see people on the street. I see people in parishes. We run a grief group for those who have lost loved ones. So that kind of thing is really what God is asking. What talents, what things can you give personally to help others?
I think that's very good because what you're saying is that if somebody follows literally just those words, Jesus is happy, but he always wants us to go beyond. Mm-hmm. What are the other human needs that people, these are the basic needs that people need to have the smallest portion of human dignity, mm-hmm. so that they can become productive with other people in society and in our community. So Jesus always invites us to go beyond simply his words.
So, Father Steve, I have to really follow up with that and say that God really wants us to think outside of the box. It's always thinking outside of that box mentality that's going to get us to that next step. As Lisa was saying as well, we're only just one person. God gave us the talent to really work with the community that we're working with, and we all are individuals with a specialized talent to be able to lead the charge, but it takes those other folks that we may not necessarily have those talents or those skill sets in that are going to help. That's why we need to build a community within community, and I think that is in a bigger sense what the resources and the tools for our toolbox are definitely in need of.
You know, I want to move, actually, believe it or not, to the next quote, because it'll leave us for sure enough time to deal with Pope Francis, and it'll give us a chance to make sure other thoughts could be covered. Here's what he says in The Joy of the Gospel, his pastoral exhortation that is not just about social justice, but it is definitely calling us to a gospel life rooted in justice. Almost without being aware of it, he says, we end up being incapable of feeling compassion at the outcry of the poor, as though all this were someone else's responsibility and not our own. In the rest of that passage, he does make the point, why do we not feel compassion and cry at the death of a homeless person, but we will weep and lament that the stock market takes a little dump one day? He is so on to detail about our priorities. Who would like to begin looking at Francis and what model he is giving us as our Catholic leader in this area of commitment to the poor?
Well, I would say, first of all, that it's the overwhelming information age that we're in, and we're so inundated with so much that we forget that in order to have compassion, you have to have contact with people. Yeah. You can't be watching television and the news and have compassion for 3 million refugees somewhere. Yep. You have to come into personal contact with those who are struggling, and then you know the story. Then your heart indeed can go out to a concrete individual or family.
I agree with Father Steve. I think the culture presents us with goodies to distract us, and we actually numb ourselves with those goodies. And the gospel is really asking us, like it did in Advent, to be awake, to awaken ourselves, to be aware of what is happening with our brothers and sisters. And also part of it is a protection for people. A lot of fear happens when people encounter a homeless person, or even the fear that it may be them. There's thousands of stories, and everyone is different when we deal with homeless people. So the woman who's middle-aged and gets sick and loses her apartment and ends up on the street, that could be me.
And I also think it's really the education behind the homeless issue, the homeless population, and just topics in general. When someone is going into to a certain population or to a certain community, not knowing the understanding of a culture and what one word to one culture means to another, it's really having that understanding of what the true meaning of what it is that we do on a day-to-day basis, but also what a client lives on a day-to-day basis. It's really getting to the heart of each of the clients and understanding that one client isn't going to be the same to another client. Each of the mishaps, or if it's a mishap or if it's a misunderstanding that they've had through their path as they've walked through this journey as well, what is it that we can do as human beings to help them get to their next step in their journey as well?
You know, one thing that I was looking up as I was figuring which passage would we pick from Francis out of so many, I found out, and it's on YouTube and everyone should go see it, the Pope doesn't talk about the homeless. The Pope lives like a homeless. He winds up putting himself in a lesser situation. He winds up modeling what almost Jesus does, has no place to lay his head. He winds up being a poor person. He also recently did visit a Salesian parish in Rome on his great visits to parishes, which he does as a bishop, and he chose this rundown parish that actually has a ministry to the refugees, the migrants, and the homeless. And he was there, and you can see him not only being there as the leader of the Catholic Church, but as a shepherd, as one who has, as they say, the smell of the sheep, someone who wants to be with the people. And I think we're getting such good modeling, not only from people in the Middle Ages like Francis, but from our own Francis. Does anyone want to give us perhaps an anecdote of their own where they have seen incarnated a real Catholic commitment to the homeless?
So I'll start off with, I think for me, when I stepped into the Poverello house in September of last year, it was stepping into a family of love, of compassion, of kindness. I can't thank God enough for the amazing leadership that I have to work with at the Poverello, our amazing family. When I say family, it's our team, our staff, our personnel, from the residents that come through our program, even to Naomi's house, to the clinic, to the Holy Cross, everyone that's affiliated with our Poverello team, because it's that compassion that they show, that they put themselves in the client's eyes, and just really following what Papa Mike started back in 1973, from one sandwich to one client. That's what started it. It was that one sandwich that started that compassion to get us to where we are 40 years in the making, which is to this day and time.
Piggybacking on what you just said, I'll throw out a quote from Bishop, who is still on record with this. Let us become more aware of the poor and the homeless and help them in any way we can. We all need to realize that a kind word, a sandwich, a bottle of water, or a donation to Catholic charities goes a long way. Little practical things. As Father Steve said, we can't deal with 3,000 refugees, but there's going to be some refugee we're going to meet today, and are we going to miss it, or are we going to take it up? Father Steve, share one anecdote perhaps of the Mariposa ministry. It's so engaging, this interfaith sharing you do.
Well, what's so interesting is our ministry, called Mariposa Open Arms, we call it MOA for short, started in November of 2011 with a group of concerned citizens who found no place, no outreach for the poor in Mariposa County. So we started meeting, etc. We started getting a few homeless in, and we asked them, what do they need? We asked them, what can we do that you need? I view our role as being catalyst to the compassion and understanding and involvement that other people want to get going as well. I say 11 churches, 13 churches now involved in this ministry, and we all take our turn. We try not to burn each other out, but you know, as a Catholic leader in a parish, it's just to be a catalyst, a reminder of the words of Jesus and what we're called to do.
Lisa, an anecdote.
For us as at the Catholic Worker, serving in our soup line for 17 years, we have a ton of stories. One of the things that strikes me in all of the people we've encountered at Fresno County Jail is the real change that has happened at the jail because of our presence there. Not only for those in need who come to the jail seeking food or a listening ear or whatever it may be, but to the Fresno County sheriffs who have welcomed us with open arms. We serve on the portico of the main jail. And I remember one night a sergeant came out and he was talking to me about what was going on in his life. And he said, you know, he said, when I look at you, I realize what my vocation is here, to be a servant to all. And that was just everything to us, because it really is about changing hearts and minds. Not only physically providing things for people in need, but to change the hearts and minds not only of the homeless, to not be afraid and to accept, you know, the love of a brother or sister, but for the Fresno County sheriffs who really have come a very long way in getting in touch with those needs, and a lot of times will help us facilitate those needs for people leaving the jail, released inmates, or families visiting.
You know, this program was called Catholics Reaching Out. Here's some young Catholics reaching out. I'm quoting Bill Simon. Fifth graders at Our Lady of Victory School were getting a jump on Homeless Awareness Month by making 250 peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for the homeless. St. Anthony Claret Parish distributes breakfast burritos to the homeless. St. Helens parishioners distribute sandwiches weekly to the homeless. St. Helens parishioners also help out at Millbrook Presbyterian Church on their Friday night dinner for the poor and the homeless. These are Catholic commitments. These are kids doing it. This is the beautiful parish of St. Anthony's. Tell us in 1 minute, Cruz, something about that beautiful parish of yours.
You know, it's, for me, working with Father Ray and the youth group there, my parents have been a part of that community for many years, and Padre Gabriel as well. It's so hard, it's such an amazing, sometimes I get left speechless with the amount of work that the church does, the community does, that the youth group that they provide for the outer community, and just the clients and the consumers and the humans that we all work with on a day-to-day basis. So I'm honored to be a part of that community, and it's just I can't say enough for that community and that parish on on how they operate and what they do on a day-to-day basis.
You all get 10 seconds, and I'm not kidding. Lisa, 10 seconds.
Wow. If I say anything, I say that the church, for me, has brought me to where I am today. And not to embarrass Father Steve, but he was my first pastor in Fresno. And he taught me what it means to live simply and to respond to those in need.
Father Steve.
Well, Lisa, I'm not embarrassed, and I also believe that we have to live the words we say we believe in. And as far as the homeless go, I think borrowing kind of in the same vein as Pope Francis, do not judge lest you are judged is the most important thing for us to remember when we encounter the homeless and help them.
I'd like to thank our wonderful panel for being here today. I hope this has become a springboard for you and for me to reach out in our Catholic faith and do something for the homeless. Till next time, God bless.